The issues we're going to address relate to Section 28 of our Constitution and the rights that children are afforded. Secondly, the rights children have to protection. Thirdly, the fact that children who are in conflict with the law also have rights. And lastly, we are going to look at how rights affect children's development across both individual life stages, as well as the lifelong trajectory of children's development. So to begin with, to create a context, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child is an international instrument that we have signed as South Africa, and what it has compelled us to do is to think about children's rights being recognized in our country and locate that within the laws of our country. Another piece of international legislation you need to be aware of is the African Charter on the Rights of Children. And all that does is it locates the rights of children more within the continent of Africa rather than a very global context, because there are certain things within the African context that are quite unique. So in order to realize this in our legislation and to entrench it in the work we do, there is our Constitution. And in our Constitution, there is specifically Section 28 of the Constitution. Now, Section 28 is a section that looks at specific rights of children, and it's very important to understand that us as adults are duty bearers in terms of those rights. And as duty bearers in the management of rights and the realization of rights in our country, we have two primary duties. The first is what is called a negative duty. And the negative duty is that first we do no harm. So anybody who works with children, raises children, has the ability to harm children, because children are in the care of adults and us as duty bearers can harm children. And we can harm them in two ways. The first is what we call acts of omission, which means things we do not do for children. So children have a right to food, they have a right to housing, they have a right to clothing, they have a right to education, and us as adults are duty bearers to assist them in realizing those rights. So if we do not do those things, it is something we haven't done, and the omission of the fulfillment of that right is something we need to guard against. And then secondly, we have a positive duty. And the positive duty is to actively protect. So this is what we must do for children. And in realizing these rights and making clear the duties that we as adults bear to the realization of children's rights, our country wrote a set of laws. The laws are contained in a separate share presentation, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the details of them, but I'm just going to outline which pieces of legislation you need to be aware of. So the first is the Children's Act as amended with amendments. The second is the Sexual Offences Act. The third is the Child Justice Act, and then there are others that interweave, for example, the Choice of Termination of Pregnancy Act. So what we're going to begin with is the Children's Act in terms of Section 28 of the Constitution, and what that is around is it's around the protection of children in a variety of contexts. So if we go to Section 28 of the Constitution, children have a range of rights, and everybody who works with children should be aware of Section 28 and should have it up in places where they teach,